Okay. It's very dark there. Huh. It's got a little lighter. Show you guys in there. Looks like one student in the room without Vishranti there. Are we live?
Yes.
Okay. Greetings, everybody. We're going to have a Yogi to Yogi session. I've got some questions already here that were sent in, and then we'll take live as well, okay? If we can get through them. I'll try to be kind of efficient and go through them kind of efficiently if we can, okay? All right, let's start off with a one Om chant. You can invoke the refuge mandala and the red light body, etc., and the bindus, strengthen the whole experience of the Sambhogakaya mandala that you're abiding in, and the connection to the root teacher Machandanatha above, and all the other great Mahāsiddha lineage master couples through space and time, the enlightened deities, the siddhas, realized yogins, translators, and the body of practitioners worldwide. One Om. Breathe in and feel the inspiration of the masters. And bring you right into this present moment. Okay. Peter. I don't think I know Peter. What is the difference between, so welcome, Peter. What is the difference between Kundalini Hatha Yoga you teach and Tibetan yoga, Salung Trulkor, Yantra Yoga? That's a great question. And it's a very good question, timely, because I saw yesterday that one of the Bumpo learning centers or monasteries that was developed recently in Europe has Kundalini Hatha Yoga class going. Is there any way to keep that quieter so I don't hear it in the background? Just a little less volume. And I thought it was quite strange because the Ban and Vajrayana are not very much into looking at anything Indian. It's usually seen as, well, that was the predecessor, but it's antiquated and we made it better. And then the modern version is disheveled. And, so I was quite interested to see that was happening. And I was wondering what they meant by Kundalini Hatha Yoga, actually, since I've never seen any Westerners who knew real Kundalini Hatha Yoga, So I thought, what is that? So what's the difference? The difference is that, let's start with the sameness first. The sameness is that in its tradition, Kundalini Hatha Yoga is going for the experience of our essential nature, the experience of our inherent wholeness, inherent perfection. Excuse me. And so is Trulkor or Yantra Yoga. And what's fascinating is that when I watch modern Hatha Yoga being taught around the world in studios and then being tantricized, meaning a person learns some form of studio yoga. It's not in a lineage. There's no more lineages of Hatha Yoga out there, like real lineages of tantric yoga. And then they learn about non-dual tantra and they read the books and they meet teachers. Oh, I want to do this non-dual influence on my yoga. And then they try to recreate the wheel. They try to create tantric yoga, which was really the yoga of realizing our true nature. In that effort, they have to fail because it's just fraught by so many obstacles. One, the people that are trying to create a system of Kundalini Hatha Yoga that brings us to essence are not realized, so they can never create that system. So right away, it's dead. Number two, it's dead because there's no extant lineage that those teachers had no realized master who taught them a system. Dead again, dead in the water. Right? And number three, with the way they're trying to do it, there is not enough knowledge or understanding of the process. So three strikes, you're dead, basically. So it's not possible to create Tantric Kundalini Hatha Yoga today unless you're able to find it like the type that I teach that was taught down lineage and wasn't a big worldwide phenomena. This is not a yoga that I teach that has a brand name on it and a series of studios around the world and tons of authorized teachers and so on. So the sameness is that the original Tantric Kundalini Hatha Yoga looks very similar to Tsalung Trulkor, the Tibetan systems. Why would that be? Because they had one root. Tibetan Tantra and Tibetan Tantric Yoga came out of the fusion of Mahayana technology and Mahayana practice with Kashmir Shaivite 36 Tattva philosophy and practice. We all know that. That's not even debatable. Excuse me. So whatever yogas were going on in the beginning in Shaivist yoga, right, physical yogas, they were just imported into Vajrayana. So there are a number of papers out there showing that the word Hatha Yoga and that the first Hatha Yoga text came from Vajrayana, not from Shaiva Yoga. And that doesn't bother me, nor does it bother the authors. The authors also in those articles state very explicitly, though this is the first time that this is being called Hatha Yoga, and the word Kundalini or whatever is being used, Chandali, whatever. And though it's the most old extant text we have on it, it's from the Buddhist, it does not mean that this tradition did not exist previously in Shaiva or Veda Upanishadic flow through time. And it's very clear that it did. You can't just create this thing out of thin air. When Tantric Yoga of Buddhism was developed in the mid-600s in Kashmir, actually, along with it, they sought out some of the yogas, and over time, even more. Okay, so it should be that when you look at Tsa Lung Trulkhor of the Tibetan schools of Vajrayana, Tibetan Tantric Buddhism, it should look a lot like original Indian Shaivist. You can't say Indian because Indian Buddhism was the first type of Buddhism and the first type of Tantric Buddhism. So it should look, the Tibetan system of yoga, Tsa Lung Trulkhor, which I've learned 3 systems of, should look and act a lot like Indian traditional Kundalini Hatha Yoga because it's the same root. Then why does it look different? Okay. So is that what you asked? The differences, yeah. One is this, that there were successive waves of retrieval of information from India back into Tibet. The yogas are one thing that sat like a pot of treasury knowledge in India in 600, 700, 800, 900, 1000, 1100, 1200, 1300, 14, all the way up to 1400s, Tibetans were going back into India, learning, not usually from Vajrayanists, because there weren't that many around at that time, really, usually from Kundalini Hatha Yoga Shaivist, and bringing it back to Tibet. And you see this most specifically if you examine, Peter and everybody, if you examine the systems of yoga that are in the Kagyu, their systems of yoga seem to be very similar to the Nata Yoga systems of yoga, of Hatha Yoga. And you can see that it was brought back because the Kagyus brought it back at a later date. This is substantiated by academics and oral history and so forth. They went down to India, they got it, they came back. They may claim a Buddhist origin to that yoga. It may be true, but most likely it was from Indian teachers of Shaivist yoga. But anyway, whatever they did, they brought it back. And there you can see a lot of similarity. But when we talk about Tsa Lung Trulkhor, we can't really talk about it as one matrix and think it all looks the same. It's one matrix theoretically between 4 sects of Buddhism and 1 sect of Bun. And it actually has quite a bit of difference from one end to the other. There's quite a bit of difference in the practices. Some looks more like Indian yoga with more postures on the ground and more similar breathing and bandhas and so forth. And some of it looks more like standing Qigong of China or martial Qigong. And this is what I wanted to tell you is that it's my experience that my research, my personal research on this, not anthropologically, archaeologically, or philologically through text, but my personal research by going around and learning many different practices from many different traditions of the yogas, is that I'm pretty well convinced that the Tibetan systems of yoga were highly influenced by a number of physical culture systems. And it may extend all the way back to the Greeks, probably the Persians, since there was a lot of Silk Route communication going on. But definitely from Upper Mongolians, Western, Northern Chinese, and Mongolians. They seem to have, like in Kung Fu, we call iron body techniques or golden bell techniques or iron shirt technique. And these really look just like kumbhak, look like in Tibetan Dumo. They look very similar to Dumo. They have similar results to Dumo. In fact, in a Kung Fu system that I have friends in Sydney, Australia, they do a certain kind of breathing practice called martial Qigong, make you a better martial artist, supposedly. But it opens up the crown point, and they all get the little blood, and they all feel the bliss of the central channel and the chakras. And this is a Kung Fu practice, right? So I think there's a lot, and that's from southern China, but I think it all started with this northern Mongolian warrior breathing training, because you can see in the northern latitudes all around the world that all the warrior traditions developed very powerful techniques of breathing, of concentration, of squeezing muscles, of what you can call psycho-energetic physical locks or bandhas to create more power. And their evolution over time taught them more and more. And I think this type of practice led them into different kind of realizations of what the body is really about and composed of, parallel to and intercommunicating with the development of Kundalini Hatha Yoga. This is how I'm pretty sure it developed. And that's why some sects, SCTS, some sects of Tantric Buddhism, Shaivism, etc., favor a little bit more techniques where you're standing, or more aggressively you're jumping and you're holding your breath. And other ones are a little gentler and do more on the ground techniques of doing classic yoga postures and so on. So these are the differences. This is how it developed, and these are the differences. Now, when I learned my yoga, I learned yoga at 7, Hatha Yoga, and it wasn't vast knowledge. I was only 7, but I kept that practice up until I was in my teens. And then when I finally went to Australia and started going to India, I got in touch with the real Kundalini Tantric Hatha Yoga, from the Nata yogis all the way down, but the Nata householders, not the modern Goraksh, not Nata yogis, which I think kind of lost the plot because they're all celibate and they all try to destroy their genitals. They do genital mutilation. This is definitely not yoga. Even their own texts say never mutilate the body, right? And they're all doing it. So they lost it a bit. But I got in touch with the real Kala Tantra Kundalini Hatha Yoga from Machandanatha. Matsyendranath is his Sanskritized name, Machandanatha and Konkanamba, way back in the beginning. And as I followed that trail and kept learning more and more of it, I kept seeing, wow, this is quite a profound system. This is quite amazing. And I didn't see it being taught in the West anywhere like this. And then when I had access to the deeper training areas, as my teacher sent me for a retreat up in the mountains in Triambakeshwar and Naisik and all these other mountain places all around the place, Chitrakoot and so on. As I went into many, many of these places and trained, I realized these yogins here, they don't practice Hatha Yoga like we think at all in the West. Because by that time in the West, postural yoga had taken over. The system of Shivananda's yoga started the whole basis of it all. And then postural yoga from Pattabhi Jois and Iyengar took over and made it even more secularized, less spiritual, and took it away from real Kundalini Hatha Yoga. Shivananda's series was for monks, and it was a generalized way to keep healthy. And it was not Kundalini Hatha Yoga. He never claimed it to be. He wrote books on Kundalini Tantra and Hatha Yoga, and it was very different. But this became standardized as yoga in the West. Who else? Satchidananda of Yogaville in Virginia spoke at Woodstock, got super famous, and his integral yoga went around the world as well. Vishnu Devananda's Divine Life Society. None of these things were really Kundalini Hatha Yoga, but everybody thought it was. So when I started to get access to these places in the mountains and training, and the akharas as well, which are serious training places, and they're very hard to get into as a non-Indian. Even as an Indian, you got to prove your mettle. I started to realize these people practice something really different. It looks a lot like Tibetan yoga. And it's not posture sequences for an hour, 2 minutes of meditation, 2 minutes of kirtan, and go out the front door of the studio. Nothing like that at all. It's postures, a few very specific postures, performed to channelize the energy through the nadi system, through the channels, to the bindus, along with bandhas or psycho-energetic locks of the body, and specific breathing practices, and Kriya yoga that goes with it, and mantra and so forth. So it didn't look anything like a yoga studio yoga, and you'd never be able to sell it in yoga studio yoga. And to perform these kind of 3-4 hour practice sets I was seeing people do, you had to have a great basis and knowledge of the system. So the differences originally are zero, really. And now there's quite a big difference, because what's being accepted as Kundalini Hatha Yoga out there in the world today is a Tantra-sized version. I want to be proved wrong. I want to see somebody who knows something like I know about this yoga in the world. I'm not saying I'm the only person in the world who's a non-Indian outside of India who has this. I am saying I'm the only person I've met outside of India in the world who has this kind of a core system, right? So that's what I'm saying. And from that experience, I can tell you that from having cross-trained, after I did my Kundalini Hatha Yoga training, I went with the Tibetans. And I was like, wow, this is very similar. It's identical in intent. It's similar in movements. And as I do some training with this Tibetan group, it's more like Qigong standing stuff, and has more bhava associated with it. And when I go to do more with this group over here, it's more like what I was trained in. So I saw that range, and that took me down the track of wanting to research it all. It's a bit of a long answer. It's certainly not comprehensive and complete, but at least I'm covering a bit from A to Z a little bit, so we can get a better feeling for what is really Kundalini Hatha Yoga and what's the difference between the Tibetans and ours. And basically, those are some of the differences. Now, there are some differences in the practice, and you may encounter in Tibetan Buddhism where the channels are swapped, red and white channels are swapped for male and female and so on. And I looked into all of that, and you can see in ancient texts that they didn't do that. They didn't swap it for the sexes, ancient Tibetan texts, and that they also had the same right side was red, left side was white as the ancient Indians, and it all changed later, and they went back and forth many times. So there are differences that we see now, but they're not fundamental, and they're not really important, to be honest. But when we look at the integrity of the transmission of the systems, you have to take your hats off to the Tibetans, because they didn't have so many breaks. And when they had breaks, they were still able to go down and into India, pick up the information, pick up the knowledge they needed, go back out into Tibet and reinvigorate the system. Where in India, it just was unable to be done, because the Muslims were well in control by this time. They did not allow any new expansion. They'd already destroyed like 300 temples in Kashmir. So it just wasn't going to happen. It happened in Tibet. It was preserved in Tibet. Not like they had unbroken from the beginning of time since Vajrayana Yoga was developed in 600s, No. But they were able to text also. They wrote text, that's first thing. And there were a lot of them. And they were able to go back to India, check in, come back, and revitalize and keep the system going. So when we look for authentic Kundalini Hatha Yoga, where we're sure not to get too messed up and do it correctly and get the correct result, which is, we want enlightenment. That's what yoga is supposed to be about. Then you go, okay, Tibetan yoga systems have it there. Much better, I think. But they also have their innate problems. They teach in such a way, excuse me, they teach in such a way that it doesn't understand the audience. I don't think many Tibetan teachers really understand modern people, Westerners, Western bodies, Western ways of life. And when you were learning this stuff really hardcore, whether it was India or Tibetan a long time ago, you were starting as a young boy and a young girl. It was very rare you came to learn Kundalini Hatha Yoga, Tsalung Trukor, as an older person. So to have older people on the very first day in class doing a yantra, let's take Namkhai Norbu's wonderful system from Vairochana, but only good for advanced practitioners, right? With preparation. When you have them take a deep breath, hold it, and perform numerous repetitions of an exercise, and then exhale, you're asking for a lot of trouble. Physiologically, there's a lot of damage that happens in older people. And I've been to these classes and talked to these teachers, and they don't ask any questions about your prereqs or the background and so forth. That's dangerous, putting that kind of pressure into your chest, the pressure in the brain that occurs, the pressure in the arterial venous system that occurs, which can lead to stroke, can lead to heart problems, so many different problems. It's not accounted for. Everybody starts as if they're, 8 years old going into Vajra Yoga training. It's just, you can't do that. It's super dangerous. Not to mention, there's an entire body of view teachings of philosophical context that's needed to hold that practice in the right way. And the Tibetans are going to learn their lesson the hard way. They're teaching it all over the world now to all kinds of people. They're going to see the Westerners are going to take it, New Age-icize it, screw it up, do their own thing with it, and that's the end of it. That's what's going to happen. A few very authorized people come out now, like Alejandro Chaul or Adriano Clemente. Adriano Chaul is from the Bun system, Yongzhong Bun, and from Namkhai Norbu's Vairocana system, you have Adriano Clemente. So some of these people are coming out who are very well lettered and very good at what they teach and lineage authorized and so forth. But in general, Westerners are going to take it and destroy it and just mess with it, you know. But the other factor we have is that Tibetan lamas don't like to teach the secrets. That's another thing. You can be with them forever, and they're just not going to tell you the real secrets. Also, another problem is you have a lot of lamas coming out of monasteries, and they're teaching Drukor, Tsalung. What did they do when they were in the monastery? Almost none. Trust me, you know, this is something true. I've been at the monasteries and lived there for months at a time over more than a decade. And I was studying Dzogchen and Drukor with my great teacher, 33rd Menri Treason, and he would give me to certain monks to learn these practices. And they had to search out the monks who actually knew the practices, who were in the training program. So when they graduate after 12 years with a Geshe degree and they say, oh, I can teach Drukor, it's because they have a textbook. It's because they might have done an intro class for a week. Believe me, they're not up there, you know, getting rainbow body, coming back and teaching. So I was very disappointed when I saw the quality of the teachers coming out. They're super knowledgeable. They just have so much to learn that they have no time to do the practices. Even in the Dzogchen meditation practice, I would go up on the roof at 5 a.m., meet the class there. 45 students would run up. They'd sit for 15 minutes, moving around the whole time, burping, farting, sneezing, yawning, and then they would leave. They would leave in like 15, 20 minutes, maybe 30, 40 if someone really stuck it out. But there was really nobody doing the practices. And that, again, was their intro. And then they go on to the next topic. It's like college. So you didn't see a lot of attainment there. And now today we see a lot of those geshes, kempos are coming out of the monastery systems and they're teaching Tsalung Drukor. And I think they shouldn't. They should be referring you to the monks and nuns who mastered that system in the monastery, or the tantric yogis, nakpas, nakmos of Bun and Vajrayana, who did master these systems. That's who you should be referred to learn the yogas. Okay, so that's a lot on that first question. I said I was going to try to be efficient. I'll have to move on. But if you want to, in the next one, Peter, or anybody else, if you want to ask more about that, a refining question, I'm happy to do that. We got to put maybe some kind of buffer under here next time, like a towel or something. Maybe that'll work. So, Michal, if I understand correctly, you are giving the teachings of the Siddhas based mainly on Tibetan Bun tradition. For years, I felt a greater connection to the Indian culture. From what I have found out, you have a lot of experience with many traditions. Do you recommend any traditions that spread the Siddha knowledge and practices that are rooted in Indian thought, not necessarily located in India? No, I am clearly, deeply based in non-dual Shaivist yoga and the yoga of the Siddhas of the Indian tradition before Tibetan Buddhism and Vajrayana existed. So you have that a little bit backwards. So let me correct that. What I teach I keep my Bumpo practices to myself mostly. Teach the 3 heart mantras. That's okay because that's public knowledge and good for everybody, and they're great mantras. But when it comes to everything else we're teaching, it's from the Indian side of the continent, right? Okay. So let's get that one right there. And do I recommend any traditions that spread the Siddha knowledge? If I knew them, I would recommend them. I hear of some Indian teachers here and there, mostly in Europe, who set up shop. But eventually, when I hear how they teach, I think I don't like it. There's something I just don't like about it. Always, each system seems to be like, not just that the person has a personality that's wrathful or too humorous or too light or too serious or something. It's not that at all. I don't care about the personality of a teacher. It's just when I hear certain ways that things are being taught with very heavy, ours is the only way, or I don't know how to put it. It can get culty at times too. So no, I don't know many. I'm sure they're out there, but I don't know them. Second part of your question, why do tantrikas often wear earrings? earrings, tattooing, so many things we do with our bodies in Tantra have to do with um, what's it called? When you have a play or a dance and choreographing, excuse me, choreographing the energy of the body mind and assisting that choreography, right? Getting it to move the way you want it to move, to reside where you want it to reside, to flower where you want it to flower, and so on, and to not go where you don't want it to go. So a lot of times this happens. When I was graduated from my training, I had an earring pierced here and here on both ears. One had a pearl in it. One was just a gold ring. And there's a reason, because it stabilizes the Kundalini Shakti. And stabilization is what it's all about. Awakenings are a dime a dozen. We can all have awakenings. Many, many people have awakenings. But when you mistake an awakening for a stabilized experience of a realization, you think you're operating at a higher level than you really are, and you're not. Now, to help stabilization, we have to do practices. The tattooing, the piercings, the earrings, this can only be assisting. It can't do it by itself. It will help if you are doing the core practices of stabilizing your awakening. So earrings represent piercing of different energy center trigger points, referral points to different chakra in the body, or bindu and channel and so on. And it's been going on forever in India. You see Indian women have a little earring here, and you see they have a little ring on their second toe. All that is to make them more fertile, to have more children that are healthy and powerful. But that is, again, manipulation of these channels and chakra. Tantric yogins, no different, coming out of the Indian subcontinent, understanding the esoteric subtle anatomy. They wanted to pierce and tattoo in ways that affect those channels and chakra systems and so on. So you may see in the center of the ear, natas, where a very big, they're called kampatas usually, natas, they're called kampatas, where this big, thick earring of white conch shell through here often. And that's a piercing through the heart chakra center, the heart blue bindu as well. And the conch is a substance in tantric alchemy that reduces heat and reduces anger and frustration. And brings on less acidity in the body and, in general. So esoterically, it's placed there as a symbol of that, and to reduce the heat of the practice, to get more sattvic equanimity. And also it's the conch shell ones, the white ones, are also a symbol of the natas from a really long time ago. So it was a way to know if somebody was in your group. And if someone in that group were to perform some misconduct of body, speech, and mind, sexual misconduct, stealing, hurting, killing, whatever. When that's found out, that person would be found, given a short trial, and they would tear the earrings out usually. So that's that on the piercings and earrings. How does one, yes?
Follow up on this. So
yeah.
If modern people, like people who have piercings everywhere, can it negatively influence their energy system?
Absolutely. Negative influence from incorrect piercings by modern people who didn't know any better, tattooing piercings, abounds. And a long time ago when I trained, I had a rule: if you have piercings and this, you take them out or I won't teach you. That was the rule. Couldn't even walk in the door unless you took all this out first. Because I wasn't going to start with some physical impediment. First of all, you're buying some kind of ring or piercing metal that wasn't even made from high standard metals, has toxic metals in it. So you're making yourself toxic. Then it wasn't purified with ritual. So it has weird energy from the slaves who dug out the metal ore all the way through. Think about that. And you're sticking it through your deepest energy points. And then on top of it, it's done non-ritualistically and without the intention of what it is supposed to do. What do I want to do by piercing here? Usually asymmetrically. So we have imbalance in the channel system because of it. So yeah, lots of problems. If you have piercings in your clitoris, take it out. Piercings in your penis head, take it out. Piercings in your navel, take it out. Piercings in your tongue, take it out. Piercings in your nipples, take it out. Piercings in your eyebrows, take it out. Did I leave any out? Where else do people pierce? Huh? Yeah, if you have like a whole bunch of piercings in your ears, you probably want to take them out. It's a fashion to do, or creating those massive holes in the ears. That was to imitate what natas had naturally after a conch earring was in the ear for 50 years, 60 years, but we do it quick now by putting a spreader in there and without any intent. So definitely I would take them all out. And I love this topic, and I studied it and discussed it at length with Dr. Lad, who is a very good tantric practitioner in New Mexico at the Ayurvedic Institute. And he guided me a lot in my knowledge of this and where it should be and how it should be. And then I studied it even more when I went around to the tattoo achans in Thailand. And that's where I chose to get my tattoos, because before that I was like, I really want these spiritual tattoos, but where is the tradition extant that knows where to place them and why, and has the transmission power? And they had that in those lineages. And I do take students once every 2 or 3 years to our trusted tattoo achan in Bangkok for people that want to go that next step. So that's something we do.
And for those normal the normal ear piercings that I have, for example, here on each ear, since we have
every piercing you have goes through some vital energy spot. There's not a place on the body without it. There's 72,000 chakras in the body. Some are more important than others. If it's going through a very minor place, then it's going to be a minor problem, a minor disturbance in prana flow. Strong yoga and meditation will overcome it. But I always think, like, why would you want to have a minor flow problem, and why would you want to bother? Put that energy into your enlightenment, right? So I recommend finding the proper places for the piercings and getting them redone. That's just a recommendation, right? Okay. So the third point, Michal, is how does one discern a view, teaching, or practice that is designed for a deep retreat and not for when we are immersed in the hustle and bustle? Well, you should ask your teacher, is this for daily life or is this for deep retreat? That's a very important question. And what parts of this that's for deep retreat can I do in daily life? How can I make it work? So I was just telling the students the other day that the Kundalini Hatha Yoga retreat that they're on right now, the 1-year retreat, is teaching them something that is made for retreat practice. That's why they're here in retreat, not working and practicing and resting and practicing and resting. And that's what it's made for. And then when you leave here, you may not have full siddhi, full achievement of the practice. It may take 4, 5, 6, 7 more years, but you don't have time to do this kind of retreat anymore. So you take 1 month off or 1 week off a year, go in full retreat and do the practices fully. And you just maintain during the year, doing as much practice as you can. And this way you keep in touch with it, you keep it live, and it keeps developing over the years, right? So pretty much ask your teacher which it is. To discern it on your own from something I would say here is impossible. Mr. Miyagi's protege, how does one discern a view, teaching, or practice that is designed for a deep retreat, not for when we're immersed? Oh, so it's the same question. Okay. Jorge. Hello, I'm Jorge from Chile. I have 2 questions. How can I purify my motive when sitting for meditation to overcome the egoic need, like showing off? Surprisingly, it happens also in sitting alone. even gaining magic subtle powers. I know intellectually that these should not be the purpose for practicing, but still I can perceive traces of them in the mind and don't quite get how to work them out to cultivate real pure motive. I wish I could move in that direction, which is the way to purify. Okay. So it is not unusual at all for a person who sits for meditation to enjoy being seen as spiritual, to have a certain ego pride attached to spiritualizing because you feel like you're doing the right thing, you feel like you're doing something superior over others, and so on. So this is a very, 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 very common obstacle to our practice. And a lot of times spiritual traditions won't get down on you too heavily for it in the beginning years because they want you to use some of that as inspiration to practice, even if it's negative, even if it's egoic. Sooner or later, though, you have to wrestle with that tiger, Jorge. We all have to. And we have to get to the place where it just doesn't matter. Once we contemplate death enough, I think we start to forget about the subtle grasping or not so subtle grasping, and it doesn't come up as much in our minds. Now, having said that, we also have a lot of deep karmas that are deeply embedded in our channels, our chakras, and so on. And they're hard to tap into and touch into and release that energy and transform it through normal circumstance. And that's why retreat is very powerful and receiving abhishekams is very powerful to help move this kind of thing, because they're in the subconscious, unconscious category. But if you just continue to be sincere and let that sincerity become your driving force, and when you notice it in the practice, just giggle and say how silly that is in the face of death, in the face of eternity, in the face of what I want to achieve as an enlightened being. This won't help me and it won't help anybody else. But if I get enlightened, that'll help me and everybody else. Contemplate like this, contemplate the inevitability of death and the silliness of these other kind of prideful thoughts, and it'll all go away. Second question from Jorge. Both my parents have been diagnosed with depression. In my father's case, with manic episodes. Looking backwards in my life and even recently, I can see I certainly have had some of these tendencies towards the conduct described as to what these conditions are. And after reading about it, it seems there are some genetic transmission of these chemical disorders. Fact is, after having some episodes which I could not deny, my maniac conducts, I went to a psychiatrist who prescribed to me a medicine as a mood stabilizer, and honestly, it seemed it has helped. I used to resist all my life to this approach, claiming to be the more spiritual ones, as meditation to be the right ones only. But facts have drawn me to this point. Drug addiction, lack of stability, and persistence in my sadhana are part of these facts. How does this connect with practicing and making progress in TMY? I am 42 years old and have always been drawn to spiritual work, but feel like progress on it is damaged once and again because of the above mentioned reasons. Wish this could change once and all for me, my wife, son, daughter, and all really. So, Jorge, I hear you and I feel you. If we have a biochemical imbalance that prevents us from experiencing equanimity, we can't do spiritual practice, and we can't even achieve psychological development. So it's very important to get properly diagnosed what kind of biochemical imbalances are there, get the medication, balance ourselves, and then proceed with working on our psychology, psycho-spiritual levels of practice. I think even before we go deep into spiritual practice. I think that's very important. So I think you're on the right track. Stay with it. I support you completely in this view. I think many people try to think that I can muscle past my biochemical imbalances in my brain that cause me mental problems, and they cause themselves serious problems. Now, on the positive side of it, I'm not a big fan of Western medicine, except for extraordinary new breakthroughs in surgery techniques. That's about it. Because I find it to be very antiquated in its approach and very kind of mechanical. I have a condition that can only be treated successfully so far, documented by multiple studies with multiple cohorts through Ayurveda. So it's a genetic problem as well. And that's why I go for Panchakarma. So down the road somewhere, I would highly recommend that you continue your psychiatry treatment, but you go to Panchakarma, and I would say, especially with my doctor while he's still alive, and start up a regular series of treatments with him where you see him every 1, 2, or 3 years, whatever he thinks is feasible. I know that seems very expensive coming from Chile, going all the way there. And I know many people I've posed this to who had problems that I knew he could take care of said, no, I can't. It's just too much hassle. It's too much money. I won't do it. So there's a difference between I won't do it and I can't do it. But maybe there's a way to find some funding, because I believe the long-term solution is not taking a drug that gives you what you're missing in your biochemistry, but finding out why it's missing, finding out how your body can produce that chemical itself and balance it. And I believe that only comes with deeper Ayurveda, and then after balanced, followed by deep tantric alchemy practices. And then your whole system's functioning at a higher level and should be able to maintain the new stability of biochemical equanimity in your brain and therefore your mental, emotional state. Addictions are a very hard thing to deal with. They're very strong. They get deep in the channels and the chakras, and they need a lot of persistence to rectify. But Ayurveda is fantastic for working with this type of condition. Okay, thanks, Jorge. Mehdi, what are the prerequisites and how much a yogi should train to be ready for Maituna initiation? For those who don't know, Maituna means sexual intercourse, and how much should a yogin train to be ready for Maituna initiation? Okay. There are levels and levels of training in sexual yoga. And not all of it is the initiated high level practice that we read about where everybody says, you should only practice this after you've done 5 years or 10 years of prerequisites. You're completely detached. You're over all lust. You're over all anger. You're awake being. You never lose awareness of your essential nature all day long. Then you can practice. That's the prerequisites for the very high levels. True. But there are other levels, and it's good to explore those right away. I can't teach them here, obviously, in a yogi to yogi, but we should learn about the sexual yogas as prereqs to the sexual initiation and to the sexual practice. And the sexual yogas start out very, very simply: exploration of the body, exploration of the energies, and solo work first, and then partner work. And yes, you have to practice Kundalini Hatha Yoga with it, I think, to have a deepening and a quickening effect. Although ancient times, many of the texts will say, and many modern teachers of traditional Hatha Yoga, Kundalini Hatha Yoga, and Tibetan Trokor Yantra Yoga will tell you, if you practice sexual yogas correctly, you don't need any Kundalini Hatha Yoga, because you don't. You can have complete Kundalini awakening along with all kinds of energetic visual phenomena, sequelae that go along with those awakenings to demonstrate that they're authentic, and the stabilization of it just through sexual yogas. Problem is, we don't have, I don't know, I'm going to state this clearly as I always do. Everybody listen for posterity. It is January 2022. And I do not know of one authentic sexual tantric school out there teaching in the public with public advertisements and all that kind of stuff. And I don't really care about a libel suit or slander. They're all BS. I haven't seen one. And I'm kept up to date with them by my students all the time. And I see them with the ads that come up on Facebook on my page, on my personal page, because I'm writing about Tantra and Kundalini and all this all the time. So it's algorithms are sending me all this stuff. It's total BS. And when the students from these schools come to train with me, I hear how it's total BS. The worst part, it can be total BS and a cult on top of it, which is really worse. So I don't know where you're going to find this prerequisite training. That's just the way. You have to find some guru. It sounds like you're in India. If you can find some guru in India who isn't famous, who's a classic Kaula Tantrika, they can, if they're really all the way through the practice and everything, they can take you through it. They'll probably know it. But I really would look for the person who's not well known at all, almost like the secret guru living a normal life who's a Kaula Tantric master. You know what I mean? But good luck with that in India today. It's very difficult. So it's very hard, and I feel for you. But this is just the situation that it is now. There are some lamas who teach it. There are some who teach more than others, some who teach less. In the Tibetan system, when you're practicing what's called Dumo or Mahakumbhaka in Sanskrit, and you're creating the fire in the central channel, melting the chakras, attaining the bliss of your essence through the body experience and so forth to invoke the Sambhogakaya or pure light body, pure energy body of the Parashakti. When you're doing that practice of that fire, at some point, some people get stuck up in the white bindu in the head, in the higher head chakras. They get dissociated because the energy comes up, the fire comes up so strongly. The bliss at the crown is called the great bliss. It's the greatest bliss of them all. And it just supersedes all the other blisses that are back down in the body. So you start to forget about the body. And indeed, Indian meditation systems often favor this approach to go up through the crown and go out that way. It's considered to be imbalanced by other Indian, more grounded tantric approaches and by the Tibetan approach. And I'm very much about the grounded full spectrum experience, not just getting stuck in the crown. So when these Tibetan students get stuck in the crown, then the teacher recommends for them to do the sexual yogas during the fire practice. So there's the fire practice, and there's initiation of the starting or the performing of a sexual practice with a partner during the fire practice. And this sensation that's created, a really strong sexual sensation, will bring the energy back down to consciousness through all the chakra system, through the central channel, throughout the whole body, and once again, ground the Kundalini Tantric experience throughout the whole body. Okay, so it's quite common in Tibetan Tantric Buddhism to actually go through that. So one way you can guarantee, if you can't find a Kaula master running around, because they're very hard to find these days, one way to guarantee that you could receive this knowledge is to find a Lama from a Nyingma school or Kagyu school, and one that you really trust, that you really have checked out, and one that you know is teaching these practices to the students. They may know them, but again, they might not teach you. So if you spend 20 years there, what's the use? Many of them are like that. Once you hear, yes, this person's lineage teaches these practices, great. If I go through this Dumo training, this will become part of it. You know, maybe 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line, they'll tell me to take a retreat and I'll have a consort and I'll do it. Then go for that, because I honestly can't send you to anybody I know from the Indian side. I just can't. I don't know anybody. Is it possible to regenerate the ojas lost? If yes, how? Huge question. Get out a lot of Ayurveda books. Start reading. You've got to rejuvenate the ojas if it's lost. There's no question about that. That'll shorten the life, give you a lot of health problems, take away the happiness and equanimity of life. So yes, we have to replenish it. We can replenish it as long as we're still breathing and we're not on death's door. And especially a way to check it is if you still have any libido. If you still feel, not have thoughts, but if you can still feel sexual energy in your body as desire, you have a good possibility to create a lot of ojas again, but you don't want to be wasting it, right? Have you ever thought to do the yogic practices to access the Akashic record and to recover the tantric texts and knowledges burned and destroyed by Muslims after their invasion of India? Did someone do that? That's a great idea. But see, here's the point. You can't decide to do that and do it. It's a karmically fated thing. And the Tibetans are very good at this, actually. It's called Dharma in Tibetan, which means a mind-born treasure or a physically placed treasure. And what happens is old texts are buried when the sect is being persecuted or the last master is about to die and there's no students around. They're in the mountains and he's at his or her yoga retreat, meditation retreat. They dig a hole, they bury it, they place some rock under it, and they send out a signal to what are people called tertans. Tertans are beings who are karmically predisposed to finding these treasures. Now, they find them in the ground, they find them behind walls, inside statues, all kinds of things like this. And these people who are tertans, their names are listed. They were also prophesied, and their names are listed. So in the future, this one will be born, he or she'll have this name, and they'll find these treasure texts. So you don't really just meditate and go out and find the Akashic record. Plus the Akashic record, it's a cute name. It's a new age thing, but I think I know what you mean, that this knowledge exists somewhere in time and space. I wouldn't use the term Akashic record because I wouldn't want to associate it with new age ideas or Madame Blavatsky or any other garbage. But yes, there are tertans and they find Tibetan texts. And right now, in a funny way, our tertans, our treasure revealers, are anthropologists and archaeologists. They are now finding caches of texts. It wasn't that long ago, maybe now, about 8 years ago, maybe 10, I don't know, where the Smithsonian Institute and a German group got together because there had been a discovery of 10,000 Shakta Shaiva texts, Indian texts, ranging from dual, semi-non-dual to non-dual, the whole spectrum. And there's so many that they're just starting to catalog them now. It's going to take years to catalog, then years to translate, then years to understand, and maybe put in practice. So maybe there'll be a renaissance in 50 or 60 years from now of Shaivist Tantric Yoga when all this comes back into vogue again after these are translated. But no, I've never thought of doing this myself because I am not a term revealer. I do know that, don't pull down on me. I do know that I have a certain propensity because of my karmic connection to the lineage to be able to understand text in a very deep way. And my guru told me that that was what I should do as well. And maybe he pulled some trick on me. I don't know. Maybe he did some weird blessing on me to make that happen. But I'm not a tertan. I'm not a treasure revealer. That's not my thing. Yeah. Ray. Hey, Ray. How's it going, buddy? I was in San Francisco, but I just had no time to stop in. And it's probably good I didn't because I got COVID while I was there and you might have picked it up as well. So when you say fake it until you make it, would this apply to practices that bring energy and sensation through one's body, such as tension release or agya exercises, or where you feel your crown tingling in the awakening? Yes. Fake it till you make it. You have to bring it on. You have to do that. And I taught something yesterday about how to help to bring that on if you're really having a hard time with it. You're saying, I have felt none of these so far. And my question is that as you are doing the practice, that it is happening anyway, and one has just not felt it yet. On a high level, on an ultimate level, most of that's true, but some channels, some energies are not happening in normal lay people until we do the yogas and it's revealed. So it's not true that, well, we're just trying to rediscover what's already there. I say that a lot in my classes. You probably heard that a lot. But I'm just trying to get you to relax so it's not too strenuously you're trying to create some other yogi being. But truthfully, many aspects of our energy system, just like many aspects of our physiology, our hormonal system, our muscles, our nerves, our brain are not being utilized fully. Same with the channel chakra system. Some of it has to be created and activated. Okay. So you should fake it, but you should try to feel it as much as you can. Let's say you can't get in touch with, we should use the gunas for this, the qualities. Hot and cold, heavy, light, dry, wet, cloudy, clear, sharp, dull, soft, rough, that kind of thing. Smooth, rough. Lay on the ground, put a sandbag on your chest if it doesn't hurt your heart or your blood pressure or whatever, or your belly, and feel that heaviness. Just really feel it. Go, that's what heavy feels like in my body. Then take it off and go, that's what light feels like. And really log it in and go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Do the same thing with hot and cold. Do the same thing with wet and dry. Many, many ways to do it. But that practice, even as simple as it sounds, is a bridge to the inner subtlety of feeling all these energies and sensations. We have to have them in the real world first. They have to be highly developed in the real world first. Develop your sense of smell. I was telling my wife the other day, I used to wear essential oils for probably 15, 20 years, all of them on different marma points, chakra points, and the scent was related to the energy I was trying to move and so on. So I was getting all my senses involved. I only ever wore cotton, wool, or linen for about 3 decades. That's all I ever wore. Now I'm getting a little frisky, wearing occasional synthetics. So, but all these things were done so I could build my sensations. And I would do everything I tell the students to do with the heavy sandbag and so on. And this then leads to, gives you a bridge to subtleize and say, well, now what would that feel like inside? What if I could bring that experience out in my mind, as Satchidananda used to say all the time in his meditation practices? Bring it out. It's already within you. Bring it out. So these experiences are already inside. But for those people who haven't awakened those sensations, the inner sensations, not the outer, worse, even if they haven't awakened the outer sensations and the outer 5 senses influence and can obstruct the inner 5 senses and inner sensations. Not always, but they can. So we have to work with the outer. Then we have to have the inner. So as you do the outer, the bridge can be made. Well, what would that feel like on a subtle level inside? If I had an ice cube in my hand and I dropped it and I held something warm and I held an ice cube, what would that feel like in my central channel? What would that feel like in my heart chakra? And I try to reproduce. I fake it till I make it. This is not something you do once and, oh, I got it. You do it as a practice. You do it as an exercise. Go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Okay? So we even do it with the elements. Okay. Sadashiva. In human incarnations living samsara, we are facing the same challenges until enlightenment. It's a question, right? So this is Portuguese into English. In human incarnations living samsara, are we facing the same challenges until enlightenment? So what do you mean the same challenges? What is the difference between the dream, sleep, and death teachings of 2022 and 2023? Okay, the first part. Are we facing the same challenges until enlightenment? We are facing challenges right up until enlightenment, but there's a point where there's a shift, and I hate to use that word because New Age loves that word, but there is truly a shift where you act as a Dakini, where you live as a Daka, where you live as a powerful yogi or yogini, and things are easier. It's easier to process out deeper things, and they process faster, these challenges to enlightenment, right? And I don't know if you mean worldly things, like I have poverty or I have diseases, but I'm assuming here you're talking about inner obstacles to our development. So they will always be there right up until we light body, but there will be a shift at some point where it becomes easier, more like rolling a rock downhill. And it's just a matter of time and fate, because not everybody gets enlightened in this lifetime. It's fated sometimes that you may have to wait because of the huge burdens on you that dying will take away a lot of the karmas in the dying process. And then in the after death states, you can achieve realization. And who cares? As long as you're getting enlightened. After death states, without a body, in a body. Sure, we all want it in a body. But if it's after without a body, I'm cool. Whichever way we can get it, right? Difference between dream, sleep, and death teachings in 22 and 23. We're doing the Taoist one in 23, right?
22, it is Dream Yoga according to Tao.
Oh.
And in 2023, it's just Yoga to Tao, including each of them.
Okay. So in 2022, this year, I'm doing the dream yoga of the Taoists. Taoist dream yoga, which is similar to the yogins, but has a few differences, which I found really cool to practice with. I used both systems in my training of the Zhengyi Orthodox Taoists from texts and so forth. Real stuff, not made up by Mantak Chia, whatever. And then in 2023, I'm not doing dream and sleep yogas at all. I'm doing only death yogas. And we're going to go much deeper into the death yogas. And it fits because in 2023, we have Sri Ramashivan Pujacharya, Tantracharya coming, who was my puja fire ceremony master. And he'll be coming for 6 weeks to teach a level 1, 2, and 3 puja ritual training at a very high level, from basic all the way through to high level. And if everybody wants to prepare for it, I highly recommend you start preparing now. I can tell you, go learn Sanskrit first. That'll be helpful. But if not, we'll go over it very quickly before we start. But he's going to come and he's going to teach high-level puja, yagya, and I'm trying to twist his arm to teach funerals. Funerals are a very high-level thing. And if he does, then the teachings that year, the yogic teachings on death and the funeral puja teachings will go together to create a very powerful experience, okay? That's the difference between the two. Andrew, our ancestors are our ancestors placed within the refuge protection mandala. What about all beings caught in the 6 realms? No. So Andrew, the protection refuge mandala is composed of beings who can give you protection and refuge. If one of my ancestors was an enlightened being, so apparently my great-grandmother was very close to being an enlightened being, and maybe she was, but my family could never know, so they couldn't tell me. I never met her. She healed hundreds and hundreds of people in her lifetime, maybe thousands. And she was a mystic. She was a shaman trained in German shamanism down through the time that came to Pennsylvania. She was born in Germany, trained there, and came to Pennsylvania and brought it with her like so many other German immigrants. They brought their magic with them. So if she is realized, then if I know she's realized, I can have her in the mandala. But I don't know she is, so I don't include her. Instead, I include her in my ancestor practices like prostrations and my prayers for my ancestors. And I pray that any of my enlightened ancestors give me the blessings, and any of my unenlightened ancestors take the merit of my practice and hope they get relief from it. That's how we should do it. A refuge mandala is an enlightened refuge mandala, and it must remain so, of verified enlightened beings, okay? What about all the beings caught in the 6 realms? Yeah, so that's still not a refuge mandala. I don't take refuge in someone else who's samsaric. I take refuge in my gurus, the lineage, the deities that are spontaneously arising awareness beings, the yoginis, the dakinis, blah, 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 blah. So everybody who's caught in 6 realms, we do 6 realms practice for. We do dedication of merit for at the end of every single practice. We do mantra for it. We do yagya for it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's a different thing, 2 different things, okay? Jens, can you please explain again some of the common ways in which practitioners fall from non-dual view? What are the key signs that yogin's mind has become the view? Yogins fall from non-dual view many, many ways. Whatever your karmic package is that keeps you excited, If I see a motorcycle go by, not so much now, but fairly recently, 10, 15 years ago, if I see a really good motorcycle go by that someone spent a lot of time customizing, like an Indian or a Harley or a BSA or a Triumph, the old good stuff, even an Enfield, an Indian Enfield, if it's really badass, I would be caught for a moment. I could definitely forget my practice in that moment and go, wow, that's nice. Yeah, I want to use that kind of paint, and look at those straight pipes. I wonder where he got them, that kind of stuff. And then I'd be right back to it. No big deal. So we can lose our experience of view so easily, so often. It's where we have predilection towards it. Look especially towards where we have strong emotional conditioning. This is where we lose it the most. But if I'm an information worker, or if I'm more on that mental intellectual spectrum all the way over to Asperger's and what's the autism, like if I'm in that spectrum, then I could lose my awareness quite quickly just by being distracted by thought. So emotion, look at emotion. A lot of us get distracted by emotion. A lot of us get distracted by thought. It's all previous karmic conditioning. Lust and desire can distract people, all these different things. So it's a general question. I have to give you a general answer. That's how we fall from our view. The only way to stay in view is to stay in view. And when you notice you lose it, you could ask yourself, did I lose it because of something that grabbed me that's coming from my base that's really strong? And that would create a greater intention for you to touch into that and release that. Can you please explain again what is meant by effortful surrender and how it relates to devotion or bhakti? And if there is time for a third question. Okay. So effortful surrender is just a natural process where we put a strong effort in and then we relax and we don't let go of it and we don't go mindless. We don't have beers and go to the pool. That's not what I'm saying. This is what people misread on this for a long time. Effortful surrender means that you have to have both in the cycle of growth. You have to put in a lot of effort and then you have to saturate in what the effort produced. You have to saturate in the higher level that it produced. I hate seeing students tell me, I had the greatest practice this morning. It was absolutely amazing. Then they go beat the dog. You're like, well, what good was that? You have to touch into that Dakini essence, touch into that Daka essence. And then you have to say, right, and here's my new being. I now know experientially what that is. I now walk this way, breathe this way. Oh, there's that temptation to drop back to a lower functioning. I'm not going to do it. This is what's important, right? So this is effortful surrender, but it's a relaxing into the result that you got, where you don't try to maintain it strenuously by doing more of the practice, but more by surrendering into that this is revealing more of your essence nature. It's stabilizing more of that. But you don't want to go into unconsciousness. You don't want to go into giving a voice to your negative attributes that you're trying to get rid of. You just reify them again if you do. Third question, can you please explain again why an untrained mind is like a wild horse? Well, the untrained mind is just running all over the place like a wild horse. It's not trained, right? It has no structure, no form. It does whatever it wants. It controls us. We feel out of control. We feel like it controls us, right? How does the yogin succeed in easily taming the wild horse of the mind? If they have very high aptitude, they will easily tame it. If they don't have very, 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 very high aptitude, they will struggle to tame the mind. And it is a necessary struggle, and it is a courageous struggle, and it has to happen. So anyone who sells you on that you can always train your mind just by being soft and easy with it is totally full of donkey's ass. It just, no, not true at all. Okay. Consequently, what does it mean for the horse mind prana to flow smoothly? What does it mean for the horse mind prana to flow smoothly? It means that your mind is not being stilted all day long, caught up like in a ratchet kind of fashion, jumping from one topic to the next. There's a smooth flow of it. It doesn't dwell on things to the point where you're losing connection to your situational energy. And in general, it's not acting out. It's not being caught out of awareness and then generating emotions and actions out of your samsara base. Pretty simply put, really. Okay, hope that helps. Guhya. Kundalini Hatha Yoga is called the way of fire. Can you explain why Sushumna is called like this? And what is the role of this element? What is the relationship with external yagya fire ceremonies? So when the energy of transformation is proceeding, any transformation, it proceeds with warmth, with passion. When the energy of direct realization is proceeding, it proceeds with coolness. This is a big difference. Passionate alchemical transformation is warm. Direct realization, instant becoming of that which is realized, is cool. That's why Shiva is cool and Shakti is hot. Shiva is the result and Shakti is the process, right? So what did you ask about it? Let me see again. Why Sushumna is like this? What's the role of this element? Okay. So fire element plays a critical role in any kind of transformation. Food to tissues, thoughts into projects that manifest, and of course, lower states of consciousness into higher states of consciousness and energy. So therefore, we take the use of fire, every system of Tantra, whether it's Bumpo, Vajrayana, Shaiva, Shakta, Sikh, Jain, all the systems of Tantra in the world, all use the fire element to produce change, to purify and produce change, and produce upward movement of energy, symbolizing purifying, right? So Sushumna then is often considered a column of light. And fire is also what? Luminous. It's the only element that is luminous in the real world. So we consider fire to be transformative, upward rising, and luminous. If we want to intensify the energy of upward rising, transformation, warmth, and luminosity, we go to fire. Central channel is said then to be the Kalagni, like the great fire moves through the central channel and then fills the whole body in some tantric yoga practices, right? Which purifies everything. That's an old tantric yoga practice from Kala Tantra. Maybe some other sects use it too. But basically, the inner fire of Sushumna shouldn't feel blazingly hot in the end result. The end result is that the blazing heat that's produced in Mahakumbhaka or Dumo in the central channel is replaced by a cool experience, because now you're in direct realization, right? And some would say that's a blue fire I've heard talked of, okay? What is the relationship with external yagya? Well, we don't really know historically whether it's true that the Vedic rishis didn't have the inner practices and the tantrikas looked at the outer practice of fire ceremonies and they saw the transformation. They said, let's bring it inside. I think that's a little too black and white, a little too absolute. I don't think it happened like that. My experience is that the rishis knew these inner practices, passed them down one to one. Wasn't for the lay people. Lay people are not yogins. So instead, they performed massive fire ceremonies and got the lay people involved in them with chanting, praying, making offerings, so that through mirror neurons, through as above, so below, etc., there could be this mimicry that would induce the same flows of pranas, of wisdoms, of compassion within the society. And that's what rishis were doing, holding it together for the whole society. Same that Taoists do. The whole China in the ancient time were not Taoist practitioners. Taoist family lineage priests held, and priestesses, you needed man and woman, just like rishis, held this practice of deep Kriya Yoga inside, what they would call Nedan, Jindan. And they would then do the public ceremonies to involve through trance and through ritual and shamanic theater, let's call it, the transformation and recalibration of society and everybody in it on one level through their participation, just looking on the outside. So I really think, just like the Taoists, that the rishis, who were their contemporaries, had the inner practices going on fully, for sure. And then they had the outer ceremonies going, and they would have it on both sides. The Mahāsiddhas, and I believe a lot, again, this was due to politics, due to the Muslim diaspora and the British diaspora. You couldn't take everything with you. You couldn't take your text. You couldn't take all your ritual implements, to do elaborate pujas like rishis did. So I believe they said, let's interiorize all of this. So I have it in my cave. I don't need to do anything. I can do it mentally. So Manasika puja was developed, mental puja. And then from that, they realized, oh, this is really symbolizing transformations in the body, or they knew it already from the Vedic, Vedic Rishi times. They knew that this is what happened inside already. And the Tantric Mahāsiddha, siddhas who have become Mahasiddhas, just went deeper into developing that inside, purifying channels, purifying chakras, expanding the bindus until light body became the standard for the Mahasiddhas. So inner and out reflect each other like that. Nowadays, we have an efficient way to do it internally. But I cannot underemphasize to people who have not gone through this training of ritual the way I did. I went through very extensive training of ritual with my teacher who's coming here next year to teach in the way of water. Next year, we teach Kriya Yoga, way of water, puja, yagi, etc., and other topics, right? That's year number 2 of this 3-year training. I can't emphasize enough that I really think kind of like the outer and inner came together for me in a much more clear way, in a much more tangible way. Taking my previous shamanic training and taking it to a whole new level of understanding the interwoven interdependency of the outer world and the inner microcosm, what we call bimba pratibimba in Sanskrit. I think the ritual work really helped me with that tremendously. I had a lot of attraction to it when I was younger. I don't have so much attraction to it now anymore, but I sometimes get excited on ritual day again. But, on those days, I would try to do one every day. In fact, some of my training, I did them every day for years at a time. The Atma Puja and the Agnihotras and things like that. And I had a huge fire ceremony in my backyard, a pit in my backyard, very beautiful one that we built, and students would come and we would do them there. And so would Rami come and teach me there. Or I'd go to his house. So I think there's something very powerful to not just saying, oh, I'm going to do it all internally, unless, you're older, you're more frail, not so much power and not much time left. You only have 5, 10, 15, 20 years left of life. You think something. I wouldn't be pursuing puja as a massive thing at that point because it's quite an undertaking. It's a physical practice. It is an art form, though. But basics are good to know. But anyone who has time, I really encourage them to learn it because it did, I feel, put things really together for me in that way. So I can only say I had some great experience with it. And then I let it go more. What are the stepping stones of dissolution of samskaras? What are the stepping stones of dissolution of samskaras? I did the Tatra Shuddhi mobile. There's some deep to it, and it goes along with the text that we have. We're talking about the internet. She means she made a sculpture. Is that what that means? The mobile? Are you here? Oh, you made a big life-size one, or in your room? Good. You're an art teacher? Are you an art teacher? Yeah, well, you got to teach these guys how to make one. That's cool. It's cool, right?
Yeah.
Did you hang it from the ceiling or was it on the floor?
No, it's in between.
Cool. It goes along with the text we have to read about talking about outer inner. Andre Riel taught a Nidra sadhana called Forms and Colors of the Mind. That was emphasizing drawing simple forms, triangle, square, coloring them, contemplating yantra, rendering, inhaling, exhaling. He said it's a powerful yoga. I'm curious. Okay, since you're in the room, what are you curious about?
But all the form and the colors of the outer world can influence the mind and can help us direct the mind in the way that we want.
Our physical outer world.
Yes.
Yeah. The highest level yogin is unaffected by anything, right? But that highest level yogin is really stage 10, 11, 12. Until 10, 11, 12, right? Definitely 7, 8, and 9. People think, oh, I reached stage 7, I'm shunya, I'm all open, I realize my nature. I don't need to worry about the outside world anymore. I'm going to go move into New York City or Berkeley, California, and I'm going to go live a normal life. No, very bad idea. Very bad idea. We want to see mountains, we want to see lakes, we want to see sky, we want to see ocean. We want to have reflection of jungle, nature, animals, elements. In Maine, the snow rectified me completely just being there and all that snow. Sunlight on that snow is phenomenal. Why? Because the outer does influence the inner. We are not separate from that when we're never really separate from it until we lose our body, and then we're just in it in a different way, actually. So understanding the elements and understanding your own physical surroundings is a very important topic. It's called Vastu Shastra in Sanskrit. I don't know what it's called in Tibetan. And and even Chogyam Trungpa started switching on to this idea a lot in his life. And at Naropa Institute, they developed 5 rooms that are supposed to really exemplify and amplify each one of the 5 elements. And you go and meditate in those rooms as part of one of the core curricula of Naropa, but outside guests can come in and try them too. It's kind of interesting that Tibetans haven't really caught on to that, it seems. It's in their architecture, of course, but not as tangible as we do in Kaula Tantra. So in Kaula Tantra, we're really playing with those energies. Kaula Tantra has a very strong influence from shamanism, which it just took and refined, right? So we know that if I'm staring out at that long distance right now at the horizon between sea and sky, it's so much easier for me to fall into relaxation of my nature. It's so much easier. Or if I stare up into space, it's so much easier to see all the energy and the colors come and all that kind of stuff, the yantras and so on, than if I'm in Manhattan and I'm walking down the street and I'm looking at a building or a sewer, or a rat in the sewer, or hearing being disrupted, burn, burn, fire engine comes by, woo. It's so noisy. It's so distractive. Cities are like this. Artificial environments do not reflect the harmony of nature. It's a lot of sharp angles, boxes, rough surfaces, steel, glass, concrete, asphalt. Terrible. So it doesn't reflect for us and doesn't awaken that inner part of the practice for us as easily, and can be actually an obstacle to it. I think it drives a lot of people's mental, emotional illness to be living in cities, to be honest, to grow up in a city and live in cities. When I was a kid, we had a construction company, and our trucks and bulldozers and all this other stuff was stored in what we call a yard, which was a massive fenced-in area down in Newark, New Jersey, in the most poverty-stricken area. And we had a lot of stuff. We had like 5 huge dump trucks and 5 or 6 bulldozers and backhoes and steamrollers, and we had everything. Numbers of each one of them. It was a big company at one time. And it was in a very poverty-stricken area of Newark. And I would be down there, and I'd go down with my stepfather and take a ride on Thanksgiving or Christmas, because he liked to go around the neighborhood and give money to all the poor people so they could go buy turkeys and stuff. It's very generous in a way, very interesting that way. And one day it twigged in my mind. I was about 8 or 9. And he said, play right here. And it was a dangerous place too. So he didn't let me walk down the block or anything. Super dangerous, especially for a white person. It was all black, like all black. And that's not bad. It's just that place was dangerous. So I just hung around the office, the front of the office, which was inside huge fence, barbed wire or whatever, playing with my trucks in the snow and everything. I was 8 or 9 while he was doing some fiddling around with some stuff. And I sat and looked out across the street from me. And in the snow, the dirty black snow, was a small little hut. And I watched, and I saw like a swing door open, and it was a pallet, a wood pallet, and I saw people were inside, and I saw it was lined with black plastic. It was covered with snow. And afterward, my stepfather came back, and I said, what is that over there? He goes, oh, that's a family. He said, we're going to go give them some food and money. And I'm like, that's a family? And then I went over with them, and some kids had no shoes. It's the winter in the United States. That should be not happening anywhere in the United States. And I looked at that and I thought, that's incredible. And then I realized it started hitting me year after year after I saw that, and many other examples as I grew older and I could really cognize more about what poverty was and how it affected the mind and the body. Some of these kids would never have a bare foot on a natural surface. Only ever concrete or asphalt, never on a natural surface. Blew my mind. Never on the grass, never in the mud, never on, sand, beach, never saw the ocean. And I thought, that's got to really affect us psychologically. And then as I went deeper into these practices and theories over the years, I realized, of course, we take everything in. We're in this symbiotic two-way flow. The channels are bidirectional. We touch, we feel, we give through touch, we receive through touch. What are they receiving? A harshness of reality, incredible harshness. The sky's black with pollution. The air is terrible, smells terrible. The sound in the air is harsh and bad. Someone's cursing, someone's screaming. There's gunfire, there's fire engines. There's a lot of gunfire. cars screeching around corners, people getting beaten up, screaming, cursing. There's a tactile sensation of your family members beating on you, because I saw that a lot. They would beat on each other in a hierarchy because everybody's angry, everybody's messed up. So you learn not to feel even, So this is a pathological way of looking at it and seeing this is our pathology to some degree. If we all grow up in cities, we have some of this, But of course, there is a direct influence by environment on our psyche. We can see it most acutely in that kind of description I just gave. We must all therapize ourselves, right? From 2007 onward, I made a vow that whenever it was possible, from 1986 onward, I made a vow that whenever it was possible, I was going to live in nature. So I did from 86 to 96. The house that I bought in Australia was in its own plot of nature. It was beautiful. We had koalas and little baby kangaroo things. They got a different name, but they're little kangaroos. That kind of stuff's gorgeous. Kookaburras, everything. And then it just continued from there. When I went back to the United States, I had to do my doctrina for 7 years and teach. There I couldn't have a choice, really. So I lived in the city. We were trying to bring it to urban. We had what we called urban sadhana centers. But I always told people, get out of here. And in 2007, I left for Thailand. 10 years in beautiful mountains of Thailand. And then from there, we came here to Costa Rica. 4 years here now or so. How long are we here? 4 years? 4 years here now. And now we have a center developing in Maine, in very rustic Maine. And you have your mountain center you're developing. This is where we need to go eventually. Not all people will be able to develop a financial base to be able to do so permanently. So if they can't permanently get out of the city, try to get in the suburb. And if you can get out of the suburb, get into semi-rural, but you're close enough to get work or whatever, you need money, let's say. If you depend on the state for money or a job or corporation to work for money. And if you can get all the way into nature, at least if you can't move all the way into nature and sustain yourself, go as often as you can to take retreat and breathe it and feel it and see it, hear it, taste it, touch it. It has to touch us regularly. And remember, this is who I am. This is who I am. So if you can't get in it all the time, at least take retreat in nature. It's so important, okay? And these 5-element practices on the outside, inside, channels, nature forms, and so on, we have a lot of that. I can teach you more of that, okay? Question 3. How can we use the forms and color? Oh, you did that. Okay. So yeah, you can use form and color the same way Andre Riel does with his yoga nidras that he does basically a whole system of yoga nidras as meditations. He calls it nidra yoga. Good for him. It works. So what can you do? Well, the 5-element practices themselves, right? But there's a lot of expansion on individual elemental practice. A lot of expansion that can be done in that. So we can go into other times where you use taste, where you use touch, where you use color and texture, fabrics, and so on. Where you do like you did. You made that little model. What did you make it from? Paper mache? You went and made it. Did you guys make one too? No? I should probably have a making day. Yeah, on the back porch here. Come here, make their model. So these things are very powerful, very powerful. So yeah, we can go into more of that now. It's not a format for giving teachings on 5-element practices and so on. But it's actually, if I can say one more thing about it, it's actually a way of life. It's a way of meeting life. Feeling the elements, asking yourself what elements are predominant in this situation. If I go in a party, I'll take some from my mind, from my memory. I go in a party when I'm 17 with my brother's friends all there. They're all shooting heroin and doing quaaludes. Well, that party has a very down, heavy earth element feeling. They want to feel the earth element and a little bit of water. That's all they want. They don't want fire. They don't want wind. They want to feel earth and water, maybe a bit of space. And I remember feeling that and going, I don't really like that energy. I would leave. And then you'd go to some other party. They're doing a lot of cocaine and what you call black beauties in the 70s, which were like a very strong methamphetamine. And they're all, I'm like, ooh, that's a bit erratic. And that's tons of wind, maybe a little bit of fire. A lot of people say they take cocaine and they get very, very horny, very sexualized, right? Their desire goes up really high. I think that's the general, don't you think, the general accepted way people experience cocaine? But other people don't. Like Suki and I don't experience it that way. We don't do it now, of course, but when we were kids, when we tried it, I didn't experience any of that. But most people experience it that way. So that's obvious, something that raises the fire element and the wind element. We would say it's in that drug. Those elements are in that drug, right? The elements are in our food. How are we eating? How is that balancing us or not? We have to watch our food. What about the clothes we wear, the textures and colors and so on? I went to lunch with my son and daughter and my wife the other day, and I said, I'm wearing blue today, Ro. You know why? He goes, yeah, it's Friday. That's always nice. You see, he learned this over time. Friday for Venus. Yeah. Correlations between now, that's really Vastu way out there, planets and the color I'm wearing. And so there were a number of years in my life, probably 6-7 years after I learned Tantra and astrology simultaneously. I was with my Tantric master and my astrology guru. And I was wearing only the colors that were appropriate, and I was doing only those activities that were appropriate for each nakshatra. This is another way to tune in and see, well, what is the elemental power of that nakshatra? And what is it giving power to in my outer activities right now? What will be easier to do? What will be harder to do? As well as, like I said, just walking along in the field of the 5 elements all the time, feeling the beauty and the grace of those 5 elements all the time. That's the way to go. It's very lovely. And it can reveal so much. Big topic about integration practice in 5 elements. Then the 5 element seated meditations and so on are very good for that too. Okay? I think we did it. Anybody have, is that right? Yeah. Anybody have a question in the room here before? Did any come online, hon? Okay. So not many people on. That's okay. One for posterity. All right. If nobody has any question, let's offer up the merit. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. He see all beings in the universe in whatever individual forms of suffering they're having in the 6 realms. As we chant Om Shanti, 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 he see them all liberated, see them recognizing their nature, sitting there in a beautiful light body in a rainbow sphere. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Blessings and long life. Gratitude and love to our wisdom masters. May they continue to benefit beings in all times and spaces, giving us refuge and protection on the path, teaching us what we need to know to liberate ourselves. And may this shine like a beacon for all beings still in confused suffering. May all beings be liberated. Tatastu Shivoham, Shivoham, Shivoham.
Any thoughts on tiger ear?
Thoughts on tiger ear? Well, yeah, based on what your animal is, that's a whole lecture. But if you're a tiger, this is time to let it rip, baby. This is time when you want to try something new and bold, you try it. But remember, our tiger nature is to jump off the cliff, chasing something, and then halfway down go, oh shit, I'm falling. So, like to my death. So really remember, it's the time to use that tiger energy to make new things happen, put energy into projects and do really well. It is a water tiger, so it's a bit attenuated, which is nice. But don't get caught up in tiger mania. Okay, that's the key. All right. Is that it?
Mm-hmm.
Ciao. You want to do it? Oi.